I never expected to fall in love at a livestock auction, but I guess life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I was 24, fresh out of a relationship that had left me feeling like I'd never really been seen, never really been wanted for who I actually was. My ex had this idea of who I should be. City guy, ambitious, always networking, always climbing some invisible ladder. But the truth was, I'd grown up spending summers on my grandfather's farm in Montana, and part of me never really left those wide open spaces. So when my buddy Marcus invited me to spend a few weeks at his family's place in Wyoming, I jumped at the chance. I needed to remember who I was before I became who I thought I should be. Marcus's family owned a small ranch, nothing fancy, but enough land to make you feel like you could breathe without the world pressing in on all sides. That's where I met Ethan. The first time I saw him, I was helping Marcus fix a fence post near the property line. It was early June, and the sun was already intense by 10 in the morning. I was sweating through my shirt, probably looking like I'd never done manual labor in my life, when I heard this low whistle from across the fence. I looked up, and there he was. Ethan was tall, maybe 6'2", with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the ends where it touched his collar. He wore a faded denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were all muscle and tan lines. But it was his eyes that got me. Dark brown, almost black in the shadow of his hat brim, and when they met mine, I felt something shift in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time, maybe ever. "You boys need a hand?" he called out, his voice carrying that easy confidence of someone who'd spent their whole life working with their hands. Marcus grinned. "Ethan, when did you get back?" "Last night. Came by to see if your dad still wanted to buy that breeding pair." They talked across the fence while I tried to look busy and not stare. I failed at both. When Marcus introduced us, Ethan's handshake was firm and warm, and he held my gaze just a second longer than necessary, long enough for me to wonder if I'd imagined it, long enough to make my heart rate pick up. "City boy?" Ethan asked, but there was no judgment in it, just curiosity. "Recovering city boy," I said, and he laughed. It was a good laugh, genuine and full. Over the next week, I found reasons to be wherever Ethan might show up. He lived on his family's ranch just west of Marcus's place, and apparently the two families had been neighbors for 3 generations. Ethan's father was known throughout the county for breeding working dogs, specifically Australian shepherds that were smart as hell and loyal to a fault. Ethan had taken over most of the breeding program in the last few years, and from what I gathered, he had a gift for it. I started joining Marcus on his morning rides, hoping we'd run into Ethan checking his fence lines or moving cattle. More often than not, we did. And every time Ethan would fall into conversation with us, easy and natural, but I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Or maybe when he knew I was. The tension built slowly, like storm clouds gathering on a summer afternoon. We'd talk about nothing, everything. He'd ask about my life in Denver, and I'd ask about the ranch. He told me about growing up out here, about how he'd left for college, studied agriculture and business, but came back because he couldn't imagine his life anywhere else. There was something in the way he said it, a quiet certainty that made me envious. I'd spent so long trying to figure out where I belonged. "You ever think about staying?" he asked me one evening. We were sitting on the tailgate of his truck, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus had gone back early, claiming he was tired, but I suspected he'd picked up on something between Ethan and me and was giving us space. "In Wyoming?" I asked. "Out here, away from all that noise." I looked at him, at the way the fading light caught in his eyes, at the slight curve of his mouth. "I think about it," I admitted, "but I don't know if I'm built for this life. Not really." "You'd be surprised what you're built for," he said quietly. His hand was resting on the tailgate between us, and I was acutely aware of how close it was to mine. Sometimes we just need the right reason to find out. My breath caught. The air between us felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. I wanted to close that distance, to touch him, but fear held me back. Fear of misreading the moment, of ruining whatever this was becoming. Ethan cleared his throat and slid off the tailgate. "Come by tomorrow afternoon if you want. Got a litter that's about ready to start weaning. There's something to see." I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I watched him drive away, dust trailing behind his truck in the twilight, I realized I was in trouble, the kind of trouble that feels like falling and flying at the same time. The next day felt impossibly long. I helped Marcus with morning chores, trying to focus on mending tack and organizing the feed shed, but my mind kept drifting to Ethan, to the way his voice dropped when he said, "the right reason," to the way he'd looked at me in that moment before he left. Finally, around 3, I borrowed Marcus's truck and headed to the Holloway Ranch. Ethan's family property was bigger than Marcus's, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, and pastures that seemed to stretch to the horizon. I found Ethan in one of the barns, a converted space that clearly served as the heart of his breeding operation. "Hey," he said, looking up as I entered. His face broke into a smile that made my stomach flip. "Wasn't sure you'd come." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. He led me to a large pen where a beautiful blue Merle Australian Shepherd lay with 6 puppies tumbling over and around her. They were maybe 4 weeks old, all eyes and oversized paws and boundless energy. I couldn't help but laugh as one of them, a little red Tri, made a determined effort to climb over its mother's head. "They're incredible," I said, crouching down near the pen. Ethan opened the gate and gestured me inside. "Go ahead. They need socialization anyway." I sat down, and immediately I was swarmed by puppies. They climbed into my lap, chewed on my shoelaces, and generally treated me like the most interesting thing they'd ever encountered. I picked up the little red Tri, who promptly tried to eat my thumb. "That one's got spirit," Ethan said, sitting down beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "She's the smallest, but she doesn't let anyone push her around." "I like her," I said, scratching behind her oversized ears. We sat there for a while, playing with the puppies, and I felt something inside me settle, like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale. Ethan talked about his breeding philosophy, about how he selected for temperament and intelligence over looks, about how each puppy had its own personality from the day they were born. "This is what you love," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," he said softly. "This, the land, the work, knowing that what I do matters, that I'm building something that'll outlast me." He paused, then added, "But it can be lonely sometimes. Not a lot of people understand it. Not a lot of people want this life." I looked at him, at the vulnerability in his expression, and something brave rose up in me. "I think I'm starting to understand it," I said. His eyes met mine, and this time neither of us looked away. The moment stretched, fragile and full of possibility. One of the puppies yipped, breaking the spell, and Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Come on," he said, standing and offering me his hand. "Let me show you the rest of the place." We spent the next hour walking the property. He showed me the training grounds where he worked with the older dogs, the pastures where they helped move cattle, the creek that ran through the western edge of his land. He talked, and I listened, and somewhere in there, our hands brushed and then tangled together, fingers interlacing like it was the most natural thing in the world. We ended up at a spot overlooking a small valley, the grass golden in the late afternoon sun. Ethan turned to me, still holding my hand, and I could see him gathering courage. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and if I'm reading this wrong, just say so, and we can pretend I never said anything." My heart was pounding. "Okay." I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the day we met. And I know you're only here for a few weeks. And I know you have a life back in Denver, but I had to tell you, because if I didn't, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering, what if? I stepped closer to him, closing the distance until I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. You're not reading it wrong, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He cupped my face with his free hand, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone, and then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I might disappear. But when I kissed him back, when I wrapped my arms around his neck and pulled him closer, something ignited between us. The kiss deepened, became urgent and hungry, weeks of tension finally finding release. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay, he whispered, not just for the summer, stay. Ethan, I can't just, I know it's crazy, but I've dated guys who wanted me to be different, who wanted me to move to the city, to give up the ranch. And I tried, once. I lasted 6 months before I realized I was dying inside. But you get it. I can see it in the way you look at this place, at this life. You're not afraid of the work. You're not looking for an escape. You're looking for a home. He was right. God help me, he was completely right. I'd been so busy trying to build a life that looked successful that I'd forgotten to build one that felt like mine. I'm scared, I admitted. Me too, he said, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. We stayed on that hillside until the sun set, talking about what it might look like, me moving out here. It wouldn't be easy. I'd have to find work, figure out how to make a living in a place where jobs weren't exactly plentiful. But Ethan had ideas. The ranch could use help, and there were always neighboring properties looking for hands who knew what they were doing, and maybe eventually I could be part of what he was building here. Over the next 2 weeks, I split my time between Marcus's place and Ethan's ranch. We fell into an easy rhythm, working together during the day, stealing moments alone whenever we could. He taught me how to read the dogs, how to understand their signals and body language. I helped him with the endless repairs and maintenance that ranch life demanded, and every night we'd find each other, talking until late, mapping out a future that felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. The puppies grew, and so did my attachment to the little red Tri. She followed me everywhere when I was in the pen, tumbling over her siblings to get to me first. Ethan noticed, of course. She's picked you, he said one evening. We were lying in the grass outside the barn, the puppies playing around us in the fading light. That's how it works with these dogs. They choose their person. What do you mean? You can train them, work with them, but the really special ones, they bond with someone specific. And once they do, that's it. They're yours for life. He rolled onto his side, propping himself up on his elbow to look at me. She's yours if you want her. First pick of the litter. I felt emotion tighten my throat. Ethan, I'm not trying to pressure you, he said quickly, but she's yours regardless. Whether you stay or go, she's yours. Something to remember me by, if nothing else. I pulled him down and kissed him, trying to pour everything I felt into it, all my fear and hope and longing. When we broke apart, I said, I'm staying. I don't know how it's going to work, and I'm terrified, but I'm staying. Because you're right, this is home, your home. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah? That was 3 years ago. I'm writing this from the desk in our bedroom, looking out the window at the pastures that are now as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. The little red Tri, who we named Ruby, is asleep at my feet. She's grown into a beautiful, intelligent dog who helps Ethan with the cattle and serves as a breeding female in the program. She's still my shadow, still the first one to greet me when I come home. I found work with a local veterinarian, and it turns out my degree in biology was more useful out here than it ever was in Denver. I help with the breeding program, manage the business side of the operation, and occasionally assist with difficult births and medical issues. Ethan and I bought the adjoining property last year, expanding our operation and our dreams. It hasn't all been easy. There were hard conversations with family, adjustments to a completely different pace of life, moments when I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But then Ethan would come in from working the dogs, dirt on his jeans and satisfaction in his eyes, and he'd kiss me like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And I'd remember why I stayed. Last month, we were at a livestock auction looking at some breeding stock when a young guy caught my eye. He looked lost, uncomfortable in his city clothes, but there was something in the way he watched the ranchers, a longing he probably didn't even recognize. Ethan noticed me watching and squeezed my hand. "Thinking about how far you've come?" he asked. "Thinking about how lucky I am that you gave me first pick," I said. He smiled, that same smile that had undone me 3 years ago. "You were always the only pick." We're building a life here, Ethan and I, a life that's measured in seasons and sunrises, in puppies born and cattle moved, in quiet evenings on the porch and hard work that leaves you satisfied. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life I was meant for. And every day I'm grateful for that afternoon when a rancher's son showed me a litter of puppies and offered me first choice. He gave me first pick of the litter. But really, he gave me so much more. He gave me permission to stop pretending to be someone I wasn't. He gave me a home, a purpose, a future. He gave me love without conditions, without asking me to be anything other than exactly who I am. Sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones we plan for. They're the ones that find us when we're finally brave enough to stop running and start being still, to stop performing and start living, to stop looking for where we should be and recognize where we already are. I never expected to fall in love at a livestock auction, but I guess life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, those surprises lead you exactly where you were always meant to be. Home, with the person who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you, not despite who you are, but because of it. Ruby shifts at my feet, and through the window I can see Ethan working with one of the young dogs in the training pen. He looks up, catches me watching, and waves. My heart still does that little flip, even after 3 years. I wave back, and I know that tomorrow and the day after and all the days that follow, I'll wake up in this place that chose me as much as I chose it, with this man who gave me first pick and never asked for anything in return, except my authentic self. That's the thing about real love. It doesn't ask you to be different. It just asks you to be brave enough to be exactly who you are. And out here in these wide open spaces where the sky goes on forever, I finally am.